But at the end of the day, it's about the word function means making your training functional for your life. Because I believe in making people athletes in their life. You're training to perform better for life. If your training detracts from your life and it's a hindrance or a burden, then you're defeating the purpose of training. Unless, of course, you want to be a professional bodybuilder, you want to be a professional athlete or something like that, then you're going to have to devote yourself to those ends. But for the average person, you don't want your training to be like, well, I don't have enough time to train because my training is actually, a detriment to my life in general. Yeah, it makes me look better, but it doesn't actually make me perform better. Hello, Aaron Kubitz, personal trainer, functional aesthetics EC, helping average guys perform better inside and outside the gym. Today I'm going to be shedding a little light on basically the 4 exercises that you need for a solid back workout. The reason for this is that in today's day and age, the era of social media, everybody trying to get their market share, we have to always be upping the ante, trying to provide new, more innovative ways, more detailed ways to train, to diet, to do whatever your profession might be, right? And makes sense, right? Because people have seen a lot of the traditional stuff, right? And so in order to stay viable, to stay interesting, to keep your audience interested, a lot of times to help yourself try to stand out more as an expert, you have to try to provide more innovative ways or reinvent the wheel on the tried and true methods of working out. And this is not to say that a lot of these techniques don't work, or that at some point in your training journey that you might not want to incorporate different variations of different exercises. You absolutely should, because different variations of an exercise can provide a slightly different stimulus to the muscle, which can help you to break through some training plateaus and also help to just make yourself a little bit more functional by hitting the muscle from different angles, which is ultimately what our bodies are designed to do, is not just be in one static plane of motion. Because while it is great to look aesthetic, to have a pleasing looking body, right, which is why a lot of people train, or why a lot of people do bodybuilding, why a lot of people get into fitness in the first place, at the end of the day, we want to be functional. At the end of the day, we want to perform just as well as we look. Some people might not care. Some people are like, oh, I don't really care how strong I am as long as I look strong. Other people are like, I don't really care how well I perform as long as I look good without a shirt on, right? As for me, and this stems from a lot of my history, working a lot of different jobs, right? And I did a lot of manual labor jobs and stuff, and I found out real quick that if I train only for aesthetics, it helped me back in my job and in my work and stuff, right? And the name of the game here at Functional Aesthetics is not just functional training, right? You might get the idea that, oh, we combine functional fitness with bodybuilding. And that is some of it. I like to incorporate a wide variety of training principles into my training philosophy, right? But at the end of the day, it's about the word function means making your training functional for your life. because I believe in making people athletes in their life. You're training to perform better for life. If your training detracts from your life and it's a hindrance or a burden, then you're defeating the purpose of training. Unless, of course, you want to be a professional bodybuilder, you want to be a professional athlete or something like that, then you're going to have to devote yourself to those ends. But for the average person, you don't want your training to be like, well, I don't have enough time to train because my training is actually, a detriment to my life in general. Yeah, it makes me look better, but it doesn't actually make me perform better, right? So, functional aesthetics, it's about figuring out the routine that is going to help you to perform in every aspect of your life better in the context of the life circumstances that you're in currently, right? And so I've transitioned many times throughout my life where I was working, the manual labor jobs, right? And so I had to train a certain way when I was doing that. And then I was working, more retail type stuff. A little less active, you're still on your feet a little bit, but still I could adjust my training a little bit that way. Then when I was working full-time and going to school full-time, I adjusted my training again. And I've talked about how I developed the hybrid strength training method to help me to maintain a very high level of fitness in a very short period of time. That's something that I'm going to be putting out more in the future. More content on this, and also some training programs that will be available at a future date. At the present time, I spend a lot of time behind a computer, researching, creating content, writing up client programs, things like that. I'm not as active as I was in the past. And so again, my training routines change a little bit, and my diet changes to reflect that. And that is ultimately more what I mean by functional aesthetics. Making your training functional for your life, making it so that you perform best in the context of the circumstances that you find yourself in. All right, so with the intro, without further ado, we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of the video, and we're going to be talking about the 4 exercises that you could do for a well-rounded back program. And if you do nothing else, this will provide you with well-balanced, solid back development. Okay, and I'm also going to be sharing the recommended sets and reps for a variety of different training goals to go along with these, as well as your training status, right? How long have you been training for, and what is your training goals, and the sets, rest periods, and the load is going to vary based upon these things. And again, going back to that functional aesthetics concept as well, some of it may have to do with the context of your job and the constraints that you have on your life at this time, which may require you to modify from the scientific best practice to fit what you can actually do. And not only fit what you can do, but get the most out of it with that limited amount of time or not ideal environment for the specific goals you are training for. All right, so starting off with exercise number 1, it's going to be the deadlift. Now, before I get too far in here, a lot of you guys have probably heard that the deadlift is not a great exercise for hypertrophy. It has more risks than benefits when it comes to building your back, developing your back, building more muscle and things like that, right? Now, with that being said, because this is a functional bodybuilding channel, we also want to keep in mind functionality, right? So the main goal is not to just simply have the best back development, it's also to have back development along with the ability to use that back and in the context of everyday life and sports, right? And so in order to do that, you have to recognize that the muscle groups and the muscles do not act in isolation from one another, right? Now, we might want to train them in an isolated fashion, whether it's in a rehab setting, right? So if you've injured something and you go into physical therapy, you might want to isolate a muscle and train it to develop the range of motion, to increase tendon and ligament strength, to build up that muscular endurance, and then start increasing the load, start transitioning into more integrated movements, right? The other context would be like if you are bodybuilding, right? And you get to a point where you need more training volume, because when you think about it, with a deadlift, you're using most of the muscles in your body, right? It's a very metabolically taxing exercise, which is also another reason why it's a great exercise to incorporate in your routine, provided you're not contraindicated with some sort of back problem, right? And a lot of times the reason people get back problems is because they are ego lifting rather than lifting in a responsible manner where they're training the muscles rather than just simply moving the weight from point A to point B, right? So, if you're using these compound movements, right? Like I said, with the deadlift, you're using most of the muscles in the body. Primarily, though, you're going to be using your back, your quadriceps, your glutes, hamstrings, and a little bit, and like the lats are included there as well. And then obviously you have to use your forearms and stuff and to grip the bar. You're also going to be incorporating the biceps, but to a lesser degree. Now, with that being said, that means that you're going to be training globally, training all these different muscles. And so as a beginning athlete, as a beginning bodybuilder, you may not actually need to do isolated work for specific muscles, right? You can start out just hitting these main movements because you're already training all those muscles together, right? Now, as you start progressing in your journey to build the most well-developed physique, you may want to start adding in more isolation work, more body part specific work. And again, after you've done your compound movements, after you've done your multi-joint movements. And the reason for this is that you might have become fatigued where you can't fully use those muscles anymore, and yet you still have a little energy left, right? You don't have enough energy to continue doing the compound movement, but you have some more energy and you've kind of plateaued with your muscle building goal. And since volume, which is the product of the weight you're using times the sets times the number of reps times the sets in the workout, is one of the key drivers of muscle hypertrophy, in addition to time under tension, then you may want to add these isolation movements in there to further increase the total training volume even after you've fatigued using those bigger muscles, right? And this is, again, why a beginner might not need to use this, because it can be more taxing on the nervous system, right? You're also going to have to eat a lot more food to compensate for all the calories you're burning with higher training volumes, right? The other thing is that certain exercises, they do use the muscle, but they don't use the muscle optimally for hypertrophy. Meaning that they don't take that muscle through its full range of motion. For example, the long head of the triceps with the bench press, right? You're using it a little bit, but you're not using it. It doesn't get to go through its full range of motion, and so for that reason, you might want to do overhead tricep extensions, or laying on a bench, do tricep extensions. So not the skull crusher, because skull crusher is okay, but it's not going to stretch it to its full range of motion. When you're doing your skull crusher, instead of just coming down to the forehead, bring your elbow back slightly so it's forming about a 30-degree angle from your torso. Elbow slightly back behind you, and then when you bring your arm up, maintain that range of motion, right? Maintain that joint angle there. And that's going to allow you to stretch all the way down to where it inserts down to the armpit here, and then when you contract again, you're going to get that full range of motion. I was training a power lifter, not training him, but running him through one of my hybrid strength workout routines. And in the hybrid strength workout routine, there's a push routine, right? So we were doing squats, jump squats, bench presses, plyo push-ups, and then at the end of the workout, we're doing some isolation work. And so we're going to do some skull crushers. And so I introduced that concept to him, and he's like, man, I've never actually been able to feel that muscle working all the way down there and stuff. I always tried to figure out how to engage that, but I was never able to feel it. And he went from being able to do, I don't know, like 115 pounds with skull crushers to basically using, I think like the bar or maybe 65 pounds. And that was enough to totally fry his triceps using that new routine. And so again, that might be another reason why you would want to incorporate isolation exercises to really stress that individual muscle as much as possible. And so that when you bring them all back together in the compound movement, it's going to make your compound exercise stronger because you've taken that time to isolate the individual muscles and build them up individually stronger. And then when you bring them together, they will be stronger together. And again, compound movement does have a skill component, right? So you do still need to be training bench press if you want to get stronger at bench press. You do need to still be training deadlifts if you want to get stronger at deadlifts. But if you combine all these things together, it will actually help you to become stronger overall, provided you're still training the movement, training the technique in the compound movements as well. Okay, so now that we've established the importance of the deadlift, why you may actually want to perform the deadlift, even though it is not the optimal or is not necessary for optimizing back development, then we want to talk about specific sets and rep schemes, right? Now, this is not meant to be a comprehensive, definitive guide to all things deadlift, right? But I do want to give you some general recommendations, okay? So for beginners, I would start out with probably like 3 sets of 10 repetitions with the deadlift, right? And to tell you the truth, you could like, actually, yeah, I wouldn't probably go as like any higher than that in the rep ranges, right? Although it could be beneficial if you're really trying to groove that movement pattern or really just trying to learn the movement pattern. But as far as building strength or muscular development and things like that, 3 sets of 10 is a good starting point, right? Now, as you progress, you can start increasing the weight a little bit, right? So then the next rep scheme would be, set and rep scheme would be 4 sets of 8 reps. And then you can go 3 sets of 6 reps. And then you could go, you know, maybe, or not 6 sets of 6 reps, 5 sets of 5 reps. Right? And then 6 sets of 3 reps. And then you could scale it back down, okay? Now, there is some crossover between bodybuilding and strength training, right? And so, meaning that if you want to continue to get bigger, at some point you're going to also need to work on getting stronger, right? And so, you may want, while for the sake of efficiency, as I've talked about in other training videos, you may want to stick in that standard bodybuilding rep range of 8 to 12, 10 to 15 repetitions, right? For 2 to 4 sets, right? And that can be ideal for that. And as I've talked about before, it comes down to the sake of efficiency and with your workouts, because anything that fatigues the muscle in 90 seconds or less has the potential to help you build more muscle, right? However, you can go on the other end of the spectrum too, where you could build muscle with 5 sets of 5 reps, right? You could build muscle with 4 sets of 8 reps. And so on and so forth. And you can mix it up too. So starting off with a little bit lighter set, hitting a little bit heavier weight on the next set, pyramid it up, pyramid back down in reverse. That's actually how my dad started me off with bench pressing, where we'd start off with 10 reps, and then we'd add a little weight, and then we go 7 reps, add a little weight, do 5, 3, 1, and then we come back down and do it all in reverse. And that was actually a really good way to do it. It's somewhat of a reverse pyramid scheme. Now, you can do your sets like that too. So do them all in reverse. So get up to your working weight as fast, or to your heavy weight as fast as possible, while adequately warming the joints up, right? And then do everything in reverse, right? And that will help you to make sure you're not too fatigued by the time you get to the heavier weight. So there is that to consider as well. Now, yeah, I think I've pretty much covered the basics that you need to know for the the other thing that I wanted to say with the deadlift was that you can do it a couple different ways. So you can, from week to week, as this beginner, right, doing 3 sets of 10 in your deadlift, and try to increase the amount of weight while maintaining the number of reps from week to week. And then when you get to the point where you can no longer increase the weight while maintaining that number of reps, continue to increase weight while allowing the reps to drop down, right? So for example, you're doing 3 sets of 10, and then you're going to the 4 sets of 8, and then maybe you stick there for a while and you try to maintain 8 repetitions per set while gradually increasing the load. And maybe you're not able to do that, and so then you increase the weight, go to the next rep scheme would be 5 by 5, 6 by 3, so on and so forth, right? And then come back, and then after you've kind of peaked at those heavier ones, then you come back down and start all over again. This would be basically linear periodization, and that would be the basic way that you want to progress with that. So that has to do with basically what you want to know as a beginner for deadlifting. All right, so next up on our list, we have pull-ups. You can swap this out with lat pull-downs, or if you have heavy enough dumbbells and you don't have access to a pull-up bar, which is not as typical, because usually you can either use rafters, you can, always set up something that you could use as a pull-up bar, which is more common. But you can also do one-arm dumbbell rows, and that will serve a lot of the similar function of the pull-up, except for the fact that it's not going to work your core as much. You're also not going to be working your upper back, the rotator cuff to the same degree, or even your biceps to the same degree as you will be with a pull-up. But nonetheless, if that's what you've got, if you've got a dumbbell, you can, or if you even have like some cinder blocks and you pile them on the end of a pipe, and you can do some T-bar rows or something like that, and that'll work. So pull-ups or lat pull-downs, okay? And you can do these typically after you do your deadlifts. Reason being is that they use a lot of the similar muscles to the deadlift, with the exception of, well, I guess the deadlift does use the abs, but in a different way, right? But when you're doing your deadlift, you're wanting to pin the bar back to you, right? You're externally rotating, drawing the bar back into you, and you're engaging those lats, right? To pin it back, right? And so same thing when you're doing the pull-up here. Prime mover in the pull-up is going to be your lats. When you do your pull-up, watch this, you want to be making sure that shrug the shoulders down and back, and then drive with the elbows, rather than what a lot of people do is pulling like this, right? And you start making a forearm and a biceps exercise. And yes, the forearms and the biceps are going to get heavily worked when you're doing a pull-up. However, they are not going to get worked. The lat muscles are far bigger, stronger muscle than your biceps or your forearms. And you're also not using your upper trapezius when you don't first engage your upper back. So by engaging your upper back first, shrugging the shoulder blades down like that, you're going to keep your shoulders healthier, number one, because you're not going to be developing this imbalance. Because the one thing about the lats is that they not only adduct your arms, bring them together like this, they also help to internally rotate the shoulder. So if you're emphasizing this too much, you're going to end up doing this, right? And then if you're doing a lot of bench presses on top of that, you're going to just have setting yourself up for rotator cuff issues in the future, okay? Not to mention that when you're like this, you also limit your strength development. I was actually thinking about this the other day when I was doing bench presses, is that when you're lowering the bar down to the bottom of the bench press, if you slightly flare the elbows out just slightly at the bottom, that allows you, when you come back up, to bend the bar better, right? Because you get a little bit of a stretch in the pecs. And if you can't fully stretch at the bottom, you're not able to build that potential energy, because when you stretch, the muscle's like a rubber band, right? You stretch it more, it's going to have more spring to come back, you're going to be able to generate more force. If you are like this, you don't have that ability to stretch that muscle the full length, and so you're not going to get as much engagement. The other benefit is that a lot of times guys are train their chest because they're like, man, I want ripped chest muscle, right? I found this out by accident, but when I started training my back a lot more than my chest, I actually got more definition in the chest, and actually in the tie-in here, it was more defined and stuff too, because it was stretched out more like this, right? And I could get more stretch when I was doing my bench presses. So not only for shoulder health, but also for performance and aesthetics, you want to make sure that you're doing your pull-ups correctly. You want to make sure that you're training your back as well as the front of your body. And you want to be, in general terms, usually training your back about twice as much, or pulling muscles twice as much as you do the pushing muscles, just simply because the pushing muscles, you tend to do things in front of your body on a day-to-day basis a lot more in everyday life. All right, so when it comes to the sets and reps for the pull-ups or the lat pull-downs, a couple things to consider here. So intensity is going to vary depending on your training experience. If you're a pretty strong individual, if you've been training for a while, body weight pull-ups might be more or less of an endurance exercise, right? And so if that's the case, you could be doing like 3 sets of 10 or more pull-ups for your workout, right? But most people aren't going to be doing more than 3 sets of 10 pull-ups, right? So if you are a beginner, then what you'd want to do is start out with simply just hanging from the bar, right? So you're just going to hang. And right now I need to stretch, so stretch. But you just start out hanging from the bar. And you want to maybe do 3 sets of 30 seconds hanging. Would be a good starting point. If you can't do 30 seconds of hanging, then you want to do as many sets that will give you the total of 90 seconds worth of hang time, right? And that would be a good place to start. That's going to strengthen your grip. It's going to get your shoulders used to bearing a lot of load on the body, building that volume. Because again, the continuum for strength training is starting out with first and foremost structural integrity, right? Making sure that you're addressing any muscular imbalances that you have. Next, you want to be focusing on muscular endurance, building up, the metabolic health, building up your joint and tendon strength, your ligaments, right? Getting the body more efficient at delivering nutrients to your working muscles, right? Next thing you want to be working on is some basic bodybuilding routines. And this is why I was talking about before that both bodybuilding and strength training, they have some overlap, right? As I was talking about that the bodybuilding training, you want to be training your muscles, you need to be getting stronger at some point to continue getting bigger. And the same thing with powerlifting. A bigger muscle is going to be a stronger, or have the potential to be a stronger muscle. It doesn't scale directly, so just because if you double the size of your muscle doesn't mean that it's going to be twice as strong, right? Because there's some inefficiencies that happen in the leverage points and stuff like that, but it is going to become stronger. It's going to give you more potential. It's going to give you more leverage, right? And so that's why doing a little bit of bodybuilding training can be beneficial to help you with your powerlifting stuff, right? And so after the strength training, then would come speed and power development. Okay, so you're going to start out with your pull-ups. You're doing your hanging, right? The next stage would be doing scapular rows. So scapular rowing is like what I was showing you before. Hanging like this. First thing you want to do is engage. Shrug the shoulders down and back, like that. Come all the way down. Allow yourself to completely disengage. Inhale. Stretch out. Exhale. And a good place to start with that is, you can do 20 repetitions, 20, 30 repetitions in a row, or you can break that up into smaller segments. Usually most people can do at least 10 of them. So you do like 3 sets of 10, 2 sets of 15, something on that order. Now, after you become pretty comfortable with that, sometimes after you do the scapular rows, you can finish it off with a set of maximal hanging or something, right? After you become comfortable with that, the next progression would be to do a concentric hang, meaning that you jump your body up, like I was doing at the beginning of this segment. I did a pull-up into a concentric hang. So in the beginning, when you can't actually do a pull-up though, you can either jump or use a box. Jump yourself up to the top, and you hold the top position like this. And if you can hold that for 20, 30 seconds, great. Do a total of 3 sets of 30 seconds. If you can't do that, hold it as long as you can. Try to get a total of 90 seconds worth of hang time over the bar, right? And so that might look like holding for 5 seconds, 10 seconds at a time, 20 seconds at a time, 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 10 seconds, 5, whatever the case may be, to get that total of 90 seconds hang time. After you get good at that, then what you want to try to start doing is doing the negatives, right? So you jump yourself up and then go down nice and slow. 3 to 5 seconds to bring yourself down to the bottom position. You're working that eccentric portion of the lift, which actually has the most potential to help you build muscle, right? Those eccentric portions. And that's why sometimes, strongmen, power lifters, guys who are not interested in getting any bigger, building any more muscle, but they still want to get stronger, they will, say for example, the deadlift, pull themselves up to the top, and then they'll just, controlled let it drop, because they don't want to focus on the eccentric portion to blow themselves up and keep on getting bigger, right? And so if your goal is to build more muscle though, focusing on that eccentric portion of the lift, which is where a lot of times people will cheat on that things, and the end ranges of the lift is going to help you do that. And last but not least, doing the full pull-ups. And I think I talked about this at the beginning of this segment. If you can do the full pull-ups, 3 sets of 10, right? You can also be doing the 4 sets of 8, 5 sets of 5, 6 sets of 3. You can do, 20 or 30 singles, right? You could do 15 sets of 2 reps, right? You could, however you're breaking that up, right? To try to increase that training volume, whatever the case may be. You can also do weighted pull-ups, okay? Maybe do a couple, pull-ups just to warm up the joints a little bit, slap on some plates, do as many sets as you can with that. If you need some extra volume to hit the numbers that you're trying to go for your training goals, then you can, drop the weight down or just do body weight pull-ups, and there's all sorts of continuums that you can do there. All right, so moving right along here, I'm not going to demonstrate this exercise. Hopefully you know what a bent over barbell row looks like. Actually, I think I might demonstrate it after I'm done with this, but with no load. Today is not my back training day, so I want to make sure I'm resting those muscles. But as for the reasons that I was talking about before with the lat pull downs, with the pull-ups, a lot of people think that if they're training pull-ups and if they're training their the lat pull downs, that they're training their back adequately. And this is actually false, because if that's all you do, you're likely to end up with some postural issues. Now, if you're doing your pull-ups correctly, you can avoid some of that, because you're going to be training your rhomboids and your lower trapezius to a certain extent by retracting the shoulder blades and driving with the elbows instead of making a bicep exercise. However, if you really want to optimize your back development, make sure that your shoulders are staying balanced and aligned and healthy, then you do want to be working your rhomboid muscles as well. And as well as, you can be working your rear delts too with some of these exercises. Now, that's how I will typically train, use bent over barbell rows or inverted rows to train for rhomboid development and rear delts, right? So some distinctions to make here though is that if you are doing a row with a closer grip, closer to shoulder width apart, that's going to be more emphasis on your lats, right? You're probably going to be able to move more weight doing it that way once you get used to it, potentially. But again, it is more of a lat dominant exercise. Now, if you are trying to emphasize the middle of your back between your shoulder blades, those rhomboids there, and a little bit of the rear delts back here, you want to go with more of a grip that you would be with a standard bench press. A little bit wider. For me, I will typically put my middle fingers on the rings on the barbell, where they have like the little gaps there for putting your fingers there. I will typically go there a little bit wider, and that allows me to get more of that retraction in the scapula, so that I can emphasize my rhomboids a little bit more than my lats. And I like to do a little bit of both of them, but since if you're doing lat pull downs, you're doing pull-ups, going and doing bent over barbell rows with a narrow grip is kind of a little bit overkill, in my opinion. So the other one that you can do would be a seated cable row. You can also do T-bar rows as well. But if you're doing inverted rows or bent over rows, that's should be sufficient there to train the rhomboids. Okay, so when it comes to sets and reps for your bent over rows, inverted rows, or your seated cable row, what we're looking at is about 2 to 3 sets, 10 to 15 repetitions for these exercises. Or you can go slightly heavier and do 4 sets of 8 repetitions, and that'll be best for muscle building purposes. Now, every once in a while I like to do pendulum rows, which is where you basically, explode off the ground and let it drop back down. It's not as slow and controlled. The distinction here, though, is that you're still controlling the weight, but it's just not in that completely crisp movement and stuff, right? You're using a little bit more momentum to bring it up, and I actually find that I don't know, I think it's a more athletic move to do it like that. I like to actually, when I'm doing my rowing, to allow the hamstrings to stretch when I'm coming down and then come up a little bit, but I'm not just yanking up and down because that would be bad for your back. You're still controlling the movement, but it's a time movement. So it's like slow on the way down, a little faster on the way up. And so you're getting your hips involved in addition to your back, and when you do that, it can actually take a little bit of strain off your lower back, because sometimes people's lower back fatigues a little bit more. So when you get your glutes and your hamstrings involved in there, as well as like the quads a little bit moving it, then it helps to alleviate some of that fatigue, and you still get that good engagement in your upper back when you're doing your rowing. As far as the inverted rows, it's very similar to that. You can do 6 sets of 3, 5 by 5 with those as well. That works pretty good too. With regular barbell rowing, I wouldn't usually do like 5 by 5s or 3 by 6s. It is a multi-joint movement. The muscles aren't quite as big and robust as when you're doing deadlifts. So typically keeping the repetition ranges a little bit higher. We are getting towards the end of this video. This video is getting pretty long. I'm getting a little tired from talking all this time here. But last exercise, just to round it all out, and I noticed this is simply just because I would feel that my shoulders would get brittle feeling if I just stick to just the multi-joint and these compound type movements, right? And so the isolation movement that I want to add in here is a reverse fly. Reverse fly, primarily with a pronated grip, so palms facing down towards the floor. And then you can also, I guess one other one I would add in there would be a W raise, which is where you start like this. Elbows are going to be bent at about 90 degrees, and you bring it up like that, and that actually helps to work that rotator cuff a little bit, rear delts, gives a little bit different stimulus than just doing reverse fly. So I would notice that when I was doing anything like this, that my shoulders would feel like disproportionately weak compared to my strength and the ability that I was able to do for rowing exercises. So for example, I could be rowing 225 for a few reps, right? But then if I was out here, I felt way weaker. And so I'm like, well, this is not good. I need to start training out in those extended ranges of motion a little bit more, just to make sure that, as I'm getting strong in one area, I am maintaining my overall functionality. Because again, we want to be functional. We don't want to just be able to move a lot of weight just for the sake of moving weight, which can be impressive. But if you're not able to climb over a wall, if you can't climb trees, if you can't, jump, sprint, still do athletic sort of things, then, in my opinion, it's kind of defeating the purpose of fitness. So the last thing you would do, you're starting off, you're doing your deadlifts, doing your pull-ups or lat pull-downs, doing your barbell rowing, inverted rowing, or seated cable row, and then finish it all off with some isolation work, as we talked about before, to not only help with the shoulder stability, add a little bit more direct work for the rear deltoids and rhomboids as well in an isolated fashion. So as far as sets and reps for reverse flies, what we want to be looking at, since it is smaller muscle groups, since you are working at an extended range of motion there too, when your arms are extended out away from your body, it increases the leverage thing, right? And one of these great philosophers, I can't remember, it was Aristotle or one of these guys, he's like, if you give me a a lever long enough, I will be able to lift the earth. And so the same principle is that the farther the weight is out from your body, the less weight you need to use to still challenge the muscle to the same degree. And so I would start off with probably 10 to 15 repetitions for that 2 to 3 sets for your reverse fly. And maybe even in the beginning, just pick a weight that you think you could do 20 times. Do as many reps as you can. If you get more than 20 reps, increase the weight just slightly, maybe 5 to 10%, and then try it again. And then wherever you fall, where you're able to do at least 10 reps and maybe not more than 15 reps, that's probably where you want to start out with your training. Now, as you progress over the weeks, you might again want to move into the 8 rep range, and then maybe into the 5 rep range, and then maybe do like a pyramid rep scheme where you go 10, 8, 5, 3. I wouldn't go and do a maximal 1 rep, but it's okay. Like, I've found that especially when you're a little bit more advanced level, doing some heavier sets at that 3 rep range, as long as you don't feel any shoulder pain, that's okay. So 10, 8, 5, 3, and then you can go back down to reverse. And you might be able to go right from 3 down to the back what you use for 5 reps. You might be too fatigued though. You might have to jump back down to whatever you use for 8, or you might just hit the 3 and want to do some a last burnout set with a 10 rep weight that you're using. Or sometimes, especially for me, and again this has to do with probably make another video on this, on nutrition and training volume. You might have burned up your glycogen or whatever and not have the energy to go back down and do it in reverse. Because I've talked about this in some other videos, but you don't want to be doing drop sets here's my rule of thumb for when to do drop sets. And if you don't know what a drop set is basically where you build up to a certain weight. When you can no longer maintain the reps for that weight, you reduce the weight a little bit and continue doing reps, and then you reduce the weight and you continue doing reps, and every time you fail you reduce the weight slightly, right? Now this can be an intensifier routine. It's more of an advanced to intermediate training routine. Beginning lifters should not be doing this. Again, because it's to increase that training volume, right? And if you get to the point where, if for example, if the weight feels too heavy, but you still feel like you have a lot of energy left, but you just can't lift the weight, that would be the time to strip the weight off a little bit, continue doing sets, right? However, if your muscles are completely fried, if you're gassed out, don't have energy, you don't want to continue just doing like lighter sets where you can't even feel the pump, you don't even feel the muscle engaging anymore, and it feels like an aerobic workout when you're doing it. That's just pointless. You're doing it in what I would call doing junk sets. Alright guys, that is the end of the video. A little bit of a long video. Hopefully you gained some good insights on how you can maximize your back training without getting overly granular in all the nitty gritty, different exercises, different joint angles, all this different stuff, but some basic, solid, traditional back training advice to give you a good, solid back development, especially for a beginner, intermediate, and you can continue training for this for as long as you want. If you want to be a competitive bodybuilder, maybe you want to train with some different back variations and stuff like that, but this will give you a good start. If you like this video, make sure you smash that like button below. And if you'd like to see more content related to workout design, such as this video, for both building muscle, increasing strength, and also the hybrid strength training model too. So we're looking at, like, if you want to be able to be kind of a crossover between an endurance athlete and a strength athlete, then you can also find some information on this channel about those kinds of things. If you want to learn about nutrition and workout for both building muscle and performance or losing body fat, this is also the channel for you. If you want information about how to prevent getting injuries and working around those injuries should you sustain them, then also check out this channel.